Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest has over 44 years' experience as a paediatrician. He has developed a keen awareness of parenting skills, raising our children to be good citizens, how to improve our communities, and advocating for children. He has written 4 books, and they are My Children's Children, Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine, All About Children, which is an illustrated children's book, here we go. This is where I get my teeth all in a confusion. Thinking developmentally. Oh, crikey. Nurturing wellness in childhood to promote lifelong health, and conscious parenting using the parental awareness threshold. I can't wait to speak to this guy. Everyone, welcome Robert Saul. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. And please call me Bob.
Oh, okay. Cheers, Bob. Okay. So, Bob, tell us and my listeners a little bit about your history. 44 years as a pediatrician. That's a hell of a journey.
Well, I'll try to go through it as quickly as I can. And interrupt me when you need to. I've been known to go on for hours about myself. No, my first wife and I were foster parents for children with disabilities. So, and when I got into medical school, I'd always thought I wanted to be a pediatrician, but then I really wanted to be everything I was doing at the time. I wanted to be a radiologist, dermatologist, you name it. I wanted to be at the time. But then when I finally finished, I went into pediatrics and did a 3-year residency in pediatrics, and then actually did a fellowship in medical genetics. So I was involved in both of those. So I went into private practice pediatrics and also did medical genetics. So I started that in 1979. About 14 years into this, I realized I wasn't really paying back to the community like I should. And I wasn't sure what to do. So I just started trying to open myself up to different opportunities. And I heard a speaker say 12 words that have had a profound impact on me ever since. He was talking to healthcare systems, but it's really to all of us. For anything that happens in your community, I am the problem. I am the solution. I am the resource.
Wow.
So what that means is it's not their problem. It's my problem. I need to own the problem, the drug problem, the teenage pregnancy problem, the homelessness problem. They need to be my problem. I need to be part of the solution. And to do that, I need to devote my resources to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that took me a while. How do I do that? I went to the community and said, put me in, coach. I'm ready to do this and do all this good work and be a good citizen. And I was involved, and maybe even smugly so. I was just such a good person. But then April 20, 1999 in the United States, 2 teenagers walk into a high school in Littleton, Colorado, massacre 13 people and kill themselves. We know that as as Columbine. I asked myself, could that happen in my community? And the answer was yes. I asked myself, what I'd done to make a difference? And the answer was not enough.
Yeah.
So I seriously thought about what's going on here? What can I do? What can I recommend to other people? Because I have a professional platform. Hopefully, as a physician, people will listen to me as a respected professional in the community. And so I put pencil to paper. I'm not sure, back then we used to do that. And I wrote out.
Well, I know we don't do that so much now, do we?
So I wrote out what I considered to be the 5 steps to community improvement.
Oh, okay.
And then subsequently wrote over 160 op-ed articles to the local newspaper about those five
Wow.
steps, and then published my first book on those five steps. So let me go through those five steps with you, if I may.
Well, I was going to say, I was about to ask you that. I was going to go, what are these five steps?
Number one, learn to be the best parent you could be. And I chose those words carefully because parenting is a constant learning experience. You're always learning. Like life, it's a constant learning experience. And the best parent you could be, not everyone has the same abilities. Not everyone has the same circumstances. Single parents, parents with socioeconomic issues, parents with abuse in the family, parents with just, you name it, everything can happen. So my job as a trusted professional was to help these families, empower them, enable them to be the best parents they could be. Initially in my career, people would come to me and I said, well, Doc, what do I need to do here when Johnny or Sally does this? And so my inclination was always to tell them, because that's how I was taught. This is how I was professional. People come to me for advice. I realized, it took me decades to realize that my job was to help them to, in many ways, gently peer behind the curtain, see what was going on, and to help in a trusted relationship, see how I could help empower them to be better parents.
And that was, when you say peer behind the curtain, you mean peer behind the curtain of themselves and what potentially may be going on with them or how they've been parented, or and help them to help their children. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, my perception of the situation might be totally off base. I mean, there might be some acute catastrophe in the family. There might be some chronic issue in the family, and that could be health, mental health, so many things. So, and, in the doctor-patient relationship, especially from a pediatric standpoint, here in the United States, we have to figure this out and go quickly and go on to the next patient. That's why you oftentimes can't do it right away, but in an extended period of time that a pediatrician works with the family, hopefully they can trust the pediatrician to help them learn to be the best parent they could be.
And also another side of that is all kids are different as well. My child is completely different from the neighbor's child to the people who live down the road's child. All kids are different. And also there's different things that can affect children as well, like autism, ADHD. There's so many other disorders. There could be an intolerance, a food intolerance or something like that. That's actually, so do you mean there's in your first step of helping the parents, does that mean also helping the children as such with things like that? Or is there another step? Have I gone too far forward?
That's not actually that's the fourth book, but we'll get to that.
Oh, I knew you'd covered it somewhere.
Let's just build the foundation here first. Learn to be the best parent you could be. Number two, get involved. It's so critical that parents get involved. And that can be in so many different ways, whether that's with scouting, trash pickup, working in a soup kitchen. There's just so many ways people can get involved. It's so important that parents provide that good citizenship model for their children and get themselves and the children involved. Number three is stay involved, which is tricky because sometimes it's easy to get involved, but it's tough to sustain your involvement. Number four, in many ways, is probably the most intuitive, but difficult in our very divisive society, especially here. Love for others. When we're just shouting past each other, and we're not listening, and we're not willing to reconcile and hear differences of opinion, we're not doing anybody any good. The fifth step is probably the most difficult: forgiveness. And that is a lifelong journey. As I've been working on these five steps, I realized that I still have a ways to go in terms of understanding forgiveness. Because
Wow.
what you learn about and practice forgiveness is very different when you're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. You mature, but there's issues that still need to be worked on. And as a quick model for that, I love the book called Tuesdays with Maury.
Oh,
It was
okay.
it was about a sports reporter realized his life was sort of going astray in his early adulthood, reconnected with a very prized college professor, and found out the college professor was dying of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. And so he said, well, why don't you come? The professor said, why don't you come and visit with me every Tuesday, and I'll give you some life's lessons. And one of the major quick ones that I took away from the book was about forgiveness. Forgive yourself first, forgive others, and do it now. Because so many times, especially as we talk about parenting here, you really have to forgive yourself for what you did before
I
you
agree.
can go on with others.
Well, and if you don't, you hold so much guilt, and it's almost like you get stuck. Instead of going, okay, well, that wasn't very productive, that wasn't the best way to parent my child or whatever, how do I do a different way? You can almost get stuck by going, oh, I'm such a bad parent, and get stuck on the negative. And I know through a lot of personal reasons, but I know holding on to resentment or holding on to pain and not forgiving can be very destructive on yourself, mentally as well as physically.
Oh, absolutely. And let's be honest, it will still well up inside. I mean, my father was an alcoholic, was verbally abusive to my mother. They divorced. He did some things to me that I still remember probably much more vividly than I should.
Wow.
And I've tried to forgive him, but there's still times when it's still difficult. So it's a journey. We need to accept that. And we need to practice not just personal forgiveness, but social or communal forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if you'd have done, Bob, all the things that you would have done, and I don't condone it, all the things you would have done if you hadn't have experienced some of the things that you did. And I wouldn't want anyone to experience any of that, but it does make me wonder sometimes if we make the choices in our lives because of the trauma and what we want to not happen to other people.
I think that's part of it for me. I mean, I think the other part of it is from the positive standpoint, that I would consider my father's influence the negative part that would drive me. I think the positive came from my mother. I mean, my mother was just one of these people. And that gets me to one of the points about the book is what I really, about the 5 steps, what I really want to drive home the point is, to me, parenting is raising your children to be good citizens. And because my mother, when, my parents divorced, I remember her saying, Bob, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy. Fortunately for me, I didn't listen to her words. I followed her deeds, because she was one of those people that was just did right by everybody. And so I'd like to think if I'm doing right now, that it's my mother's example. So happiness to me is a blissful secondary side effect of parenting your children to be good citizens.
Yeah. And your book actually goes through those 5 steps to community? Does it cover those off in a bit greater detail?
Yes. The first book is entitled My Children's Children, Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine. And each of the chapters each of the sections of the book covers those various steps. And each chapter has various action steps with a take-home message, what you can do to learn to be the best parent you could be, get involved, stay involved, love for others, and forgiveness. So that book, that was from 1999 to 2013. So that was about a 14-year project for that book. But obviously for me, that book was setting the stage for what was yet to come. Subsequently to that, we published a children's book that was beautifully illustrated. And I published another book that was co-written with, that was more of a scientific book. But the most recent book is on what's called conscious parenting. And so that's what you were getting to. How do you do this? What are the steps here?
Yes, and this is what you explore in conscious parenting, right, isn't it?
To me, conscious parenting is an enhanced awareness of where you are in the relationship with your child and where your child is developmentally. And to do that, I talk about a line, and that line is the parental awareness threshold. And so a little bit of background to that, when I changed jobs late in my career, and I had to take a leadership course. And they said, you're going to have to take this leadership course. And I rolled my eyes and said, oh, do I really have to do this? Okay, I will. And well, so many things, I learned something. And the leadership course was called Conscious Leadership, but I'm simplifying it. But a conscious leader recognizes when they're above the line. The line is when you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. Below the line is when you're closed, you're defensive, you're right. You're always right. And everyone else is wrong. Now, the point is we're going to be above and below. All day long, we're going to be, the whole point is being conscious of that. And if you find out, I'm really below the line right now, how can I change my behavior? What can I do? Listening, interacting, whatever. I shift that line to what I call the parental awareness threshold. When you're above the parental awareness threshold, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn, you're ready to listen intently and engage with your child. When you're below the parental awareness threshold, you're closed, you're defensive, you're always right, because I said so, because I'm the parent.
I have a mug with that on. My son always laughs because I've got a mug that goes, because I said so.
But yes. And so the point is just knowing where you are and trying to make a change. Now, you won't always do it in the moment. As a matter of fact, in the moment, you might say, that didn't go well, like you said. But hopefully if people start looking at this paradigm, then it will be something they will do in retrospect. And again, the whole point for me of conscious parenting is raising our children to be good citizens.
Yeah, I agree. And so below the line is bad and above the line is good, just to make that clear. Because are there any situations where you could be below the line and you've closed and all? Are there any situations where it would be good there?
Well, let me back up for just a second. I don't want to say good, bad, because if if you're, and that would imply that when you're below the line, you're a bad person. You're human. Okay, you're gonna be there because of what sets you off at times, and you have to remember. You might respond to the same set of circumstances very differently on a Monday morning than you might on a Friday morning. So that's where you have to sort of take that step back. And what I talk about in terms of the line or the parental awareness threshold is for any circumstance that's happening, especially a behavioral situation. Pause, assess, and choose. And that is more than just parenting. That's almost everything we do in our interpersonal relationships. But you need to pause, assess the situation, and choose. One of the examples in the book is, and it's meant to be a very easily digestible book, is mother picks up her child from school, goes through the drive-through at a fast food restaurant because the child says, I'm thirsty. So she gets the child a drink and hands it back to the child in the back seat and says, don't spill this. Well, 2 blocks away, Mom, my drink spilled. Now, Mom yells, pulls over, I told you not to do that.
That could be me on a bad day, on a really bad day.
If she paused and assessed, it might have been that, and this is a little bit of, obviously, this is a purposeful example, is that the book bag shifted, knocked the drink over. And that was when you made that sharp turn a block ago. So in many ways, the parent set the child up for failure because the book bag was loose and the drink. And so a pause, assess, and choose is that maybe a different response would have been, let's work on this together and going forward. A personal example is one night, my youngest son was about 7 or 8. He's 32 now. He said something that really set me off, and I got angry and I yelled at him. He just melted. He just turned into a puddle. He was just so upset that I would do that. And mom got mad at me for yelling at him. So we went into that typical family meltdown mode where nobody talks and just walks past each other for a couple hours. Well, then it was bedtime and it was time to sit down. The dust had settled and I laid down with him. I said, son, I'm so sorry. I think you did something wrong, but dad was totally wrong in terms of how I responded. And I want to apologize and I want to say I'm sorry. He said, Dad, would you be quiet? I said, why? He said, I hate it when you're nice. And so I don't say that to pat myself on the back, but it tells me that I was even back then, I was thinking about this conscious parenting model, that even if I goofed up at the time, I could in retrospect look at it. And, retrospect is hard. Sometimes it's hard to do your own retro analysis. Sometimes you need a partner, a spouse, a good friend, a sister, a confidant, a priest, just somebody that you can say, this is what went down the other day. It did not go well. My child and I are now at odds. What do you think I should have done? And how can I do better going forward? Sometimes that give and take is very helpful.
Exactly. And I try and encourage that.
I've done a lot of that as a professional.
Yeah. And I try and encourage that with my friends. I sort of go, look, I need your honest opinion. And, it's about being a more mature person to go, yeah, no, okay, thanks for that feedback. And, I accept that feedback. I mean, it's funny you should say about the drink spilling incident, because I've changed how I deal with those type of things, because my son did do that. And I'm talking probably 6 months ago, where he spilled a whole container of drink everywhere, right? He was having dinner and he spilled it everywhere. And I went, oh my God, I was busy. And I did what the mum in the car did. And I was like, I went, well, not crazy, but like I'd sort of shouted at him and went, oh, quick, get a cloth, blah, blah, blah. And then I sat down and I did the retrospect thing that you're talking about. And I went, oh, that wasn't really good. Because number one, it was an accident. He didn't mean to spill the whole thing over the table. And I sat and said, look, I'm really sorry. You didn't mean to do it. It was an accident, wasn't it? And he was like, yes. Because he went to reach for something and spilt it. And so then I was like, well, okay, mummy didn't mean to shout, but like I shouldn't. And that was, what I shouldn't have done. And so now when things happen that I think, oh, that was an accident, it stopped me from going, and blowing up and exploding. And I sort of sit down and I sort of question him and say, okay, what could you have done better? If you'd have spilt the cup, spilt the cup on the floor, where could you have put it that would have been safe, that would have meant that it wouldn't have got spilt? And so trying to get him to think about how he could have done things differently, and trying not to just explode.
I love that, because what you describe is discipline. Remember, the root word for discipline is disciple. So anything we're doing in terms of a behavioral issue should be a teaching experience, because disciple means to teach. So we don't want to punish. We want to make it a teaching experience. And so, because a lot of people equate punishment to discipline.
But it's not.
I think punishment is a rare event. Discipline should be much more common. That's not to say I want permissive kids doing whatever the heck they want to in the world. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But it can be done in a loving, instructive way. rather than using physical discipline.
And what's he going to learn if I
punishment.
just shout at him? If I just shout at him and then I clear it all up for him? So if he spills water, juice, whatever, he clears it up. I go, right, how are you going to clear that up now? Right. And he clears it up because he's made the mess. So it's not, as mums, you want to get straight in there and clear it all up, but he clears it up. He thinks about, well, what does he need to clear it up? And then he thinks about, well, how could he have prevented it from happening? So that's how I'm trying to do it at the moment. It doesn't work every time, but that's the human part of me. Like you say, we're all human. We've all had no sleep or really busy or, doing half a dozen things. But it's just how I'm doing it at the moment because I just feel as though I don't go any other way. He doesn't learn.
A lot of parents say, I told you. How do you not learn that? I told you so many times. This is the 5th time I've told you that. Well, we need to remember that the adult brain is really not mature until age 25.
Yes.
So even the 15-year-old who, quote, should know better, is still going to make plenty of mistakes. Unfortunately, some of those mistakes might be more consequential than spilling a glass of juice in terms of bad behaviors or bad choices.
Yes, and I think it goes back to you and saying you want to raise good citizens. I want to be able, look, at the end of the day, I had my son late in life, right? So I sort of want to be able to prepare him for when potentially I'm not going to be around. And let's hope I live till I'm like 90, right? Which means he'll be 40 odd and then we'll all be good. And he should have hopefully have got through his teen years and his early 20s and who knows, right? Who knows what it'd be like at 40. But I do sit there and I want him to be able to, if he has a problem, think about, well, how can he solve that? How can he do things differently? Because, there's no such word in our household. There's no such word as can't. There's just doing it a different way. You've just got to think about it. You can't run 100 meters in 10 seconds, but what else could you do? I don't know, put roller skates on with jetpack and then you could actually roller skate within 10 seconds of 100 meters. I don't know. Maybe that's something that you're not going to be skilled at, but think about something else. I don't know. But yeah, I'm trying to educate him that way. I know. So, okay. So I'm not sure if we've fully covered it, but what about if you're under the line? I know we've said about stepping back and stuff, but how do you get yourself above the line? Is there certain things that you can do to change that? I'm not going to label it as bad, but
I think it might be different. It might be different for everybody. I mean, for some people it might be, but if you start with the pause, assess, and choose cycle, the pause, assess, and choose might be that deep breathing. The mindfulness might be that stepping back from the situation for a second.
Is that the pause section?
Yeah.
Where you sort of go into a different room or something like that, where you go, okay,
yeah,
I need to just change my state.
Or you might realize, because the way you handle the situation on a fairly constant basis, maybe you do need some professional help yourself, or talking to somebody, or finding out how you can change your behaviors, because you want to be that positive example for your child. And if you find out you're always being that negative example for your child and the child's withdrawing, then it's not just a simple thing as pausing and going into the other room. You might need some help, and that can happen. That can happen in single parent households. That can certainly dual parent households are not ideal either sometimes. I mean, so every
well, I sometimes think there's more in the mix when there's dual parent. I mean, it's great because you can half the workload, but at least I'm the only person I have to worry about as such. Obviously my son, but I control and deal with myself. Okay. But then when you've got another adult in the mix as well, and you're dealing them with their views, their opinions, that's a whole different relationship.
Oh, absolutely. And children know how to play one parent against the other. So, go ask your mom, go ask your dad, and all of those things. Mom wouldn't have done that. Dad wouldn't have done that. So they know how to do that. But to get specifically to your point again, I think it's that in the moment analysis and then that retrospective analysis. And if you find some things that did work, but not as completely as you'd like, start using those more. The things that don't work, start using those less, but seeking the advice of others. A trusted professional, your pediatrician, your doctor, there's so many other people that can be helpful to you. One word of caution, though, in my experience, and this is sort of with with babies, mothers would come into the office with their mothers in tow, or the grandmothers, and the grandmothers would look at me and said, "She's doing it all wrong. I did it that way, and everything was fine, and I don't know why they're doing it this way now." And so when grandma leaves the room, I look at mom and I say, "Mom, don't confront your mother. Don't, just smile and say thank you, and then do what you want to do, what you need to do." So sometimes advice isn't always great in terms of handling behavior issues. Another example is, some families will see, all my child needs is a good whipping. That, to me, that's a no-no. And why is that?
I would hope there's not many that say that.
Well, a lot of parents would say, my dad gave me a good whooping when I was a kid, and it taught me a lesson, and I didn't do that again. The take-home message is, if children that are physically abused, and I consider it abuse when they're youngsters, are much more likely to translate that into their adult behaviors. Not everyone that smokes gets lung cancer, but it sure increases your risk. Not everyone that gets physically hit as a child becomes a physical abuser, but we know it certainly increases your risk. And I don't want that to happen.
No, I agree with you. Can we make our children, I know your book's called Conscious Parenting. Maybe this is your next book. Can we make conscious children? I think so. Can we, because is there any way that we can help our children be conscious about their actions? And I'm thinking while I'm thinking about the conscious parenting and the fact that we're needing to step back, pause, be conscious with our parenting. But then regarding your first book, which was Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine, are we able, and how do we do that? How do we make our kids conscious of the things that they do and the impacts that they have? And I'm sorry, I've just thrown that left of field.
Well, you gave me some examples of what you're doing. You're making your child conscious of some of the errors that have occurred, and learning how to think through the spilled juice. You might think that's simple. No, I think that kind of conscious awareness of a situation translates very nicely to broader social situations. So long as you, in a partnership with your child, get involved, stay involved, show love for others, and practice forgiveness. You can't be driving down the road cursing everybody under your breath, and then get out of the car and smile and say hi, and expect your child's going to understand the duplicity in what you're doing.
It's almost like you've been sitting on my shoulder, Bob, for the last 2 weeks, because I don't normally, I sing in the car. I sing and my son tells me to shut up, but he doesn't tell me to shut up. He uses other words, but it's quite literally shut up, mum. But the other day, and I cannot think why I was even in that place, but the other day I was in the car and I was going, "Oh, come on, hurry up." And he turned around to me and he went, "Mum," he said, "you're sounding like my dad." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay. maybe mummy's having maybe mummy needs to rethink where she's at, because he never really says that to me, and I don't really. I've consciously made myself. I used to be like this, but I consciously has made myself not get stressed out driving, because that person in front is in their life. They don't know they're stressing me out. Why should I actually stress my body out and my mental state even more with the person who's completely oblivious to who I am and where I am? And in fact, they could be saving me from an accident down the road because they're deciding to drive 20 k's an hour under the speed limit or whatever. But do you know what I mean? I have to sort of re-educate myself and change my state, which I suppose is what you need to do as a parent, as well, to go, well, hang on a minute.
You're pausing, you're assessing,
yes,
and choosing.
Yes. Yeah, well, yes. Because I used to be like, oh my God, are you insane? Because, Australians do drive differently from people in the UK, I have to say. I'm sure I'm sure in the States it would be different too.
My oldest son was driving with his mother one time, and somebody cut her off, and she said some expletive. And my son in the background said, well, maybe he's a blank. And it was...
Well, they do. They're like little sponges sitting in the back of the car watching what goes on. I know, it's insane. It's insane. So, okay. So I'm just trying to think what is the goal of parenting? What is the goal of parenting? Is it to, I think you've already touched on it though, but is it to bring up intelligent, that's a bad word, but is it to bring up good citizens? And also another question that was in my head is, how do we do that with our teenagers? Because our teenagers are hit and miss, I have to say, Bob, that they're hit and miss.
The first part of your question is yes, it's to raise good citizens. Good citizens care for each other. Citizens care about each other. Citizens are empathetic for the needs of others, and they work together for joint solutions. They recognize that not just I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource. They change the pronoun. We are the problem. We are the solution. We are the resource. Teenagers, that's difficult. I mean, it's an up and down.
Well, they are.
It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I mean, it can, and it's so, again, it's the example. It's you never hate your children. You might hate their behavior, though I don't like the word hate, but just intensely dislike.
Yes.
Would be better.
Dislike.
But it's too easy to fall into the trap of not being the good example, and not providing that, not being the good example and providing the basis for them going forward. Now, that's not to say that there's, when they've done something wrong, if you find out they were drinking and driving, I mean, there are some significant consequences to that. I mean, that's not that they get shackled to the bed, but that might be, no phone, no TV, no computer, except for what they have to do for school studies for a period of time that really has to be determined by the family in terms of what's the most appropriate.
Would you get them involved in, so say they got caught drink driving or whatever, right? Would you then get them involved in something that was to do with victims of drink driving, or it's to get them involved more in the community side of things and sort of get them?
I think that would be a great idea.
I just think these kids these kids have it too good. Shame, that's so bad. I sound such an oldie. But these kids have it too good. And I actually sit there, and I suppose it's my age, because if I was younger, I probably wouldn't care, right? But the thing is, I sit there and I go, I do think getting them involved in homelessness feeding families that don't have as much as their own family and things like that may help. Have you found any research or anything that sort of says getting kids involved in those sort of community projects as such?
I don't have any.
Bring out good citizens?
Yeah, I don't have any research per se that says 92% of the time when they do that, things turn out much better than the other. But to me, it's intuitive and just makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's fine. My kid's probably going to hate me going forward. But yeah, no, that's fair enough.
And you can pick and choose. I mean, it might not be directly that. I mean, if it was the drunk driving, might not be the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers thing or families. It could be something else that's related, so they still understand the need for community involvement, and what they did was wrong, and there are consequences, but I still love you unconditionally, and we're going to work to make this different going forward.
Yes, no, I agree. Look, so thank you for today. Thank you coming on board and talking to us about your books and stuff. Where do people connect with you? My website, which is www.mychildrenschildren.com, has the books, has a blog that I send out, has a contact page, and has a lot of the just a lot of information that's cool. Yes, it does. I have, and I've tried to post a blog now on the blog at least weekly about things that I'm writing, and it can be on a variety of things. It's hard work keeping up on a blog, so hats off to you, because it is, like, even on a weekly basis, it's very hard. I don't think I could do what you're doing. Well, it's a lot of it. My next writing project, it gives me fuel for some of this. Oh, okay. My next writing project is about. Well, it's going to be. I've got somebody that signed on with me to do it, but I don't know if this is going to be the title or not. It's called What Really Matters. And it's truth, trust, science, civility, diversity, and faith. Wow. Okay. Oh, I can't wait for this to come out. With your other books, are they on Amazon and places like that? Can people, as well as obviously your website? Okay, that's cool. So people can find them as well. I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that. Yeah. Wow, this new project sounds good. Let's hope it doesn't take you 15 years to put this one out, though. Well, I hope not. It's how long's the book taking you now? Well, this book is about 2/3 written, but that's probably another. Wow. Once you get down, it's probably another 12, 18 months in terms of fine tuning and that sort of stuff. I know people don't understand what goes into writing a book, do they? Not at all. No. Okay, cool. Look. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I usually ask, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? But I've changed my question. So I am so sorry, Bob. I've changed it to, and I would be interesting to see what you would say. I would change it to, if you could recommend a book to my listeners, what would it be and why? And it can't be your own ones, because we've already plugged them enough on this podcast. No, I need a few more plugs. No. Well, a quick, simple one would be Tuesdays with Maury. And Maury I want to get this book. Maury is spelled Morrie. Another book that I really recently like is called Caste, Caste. Oh, yeah. It's by Isabel Wilkerson. And she talks about the caste system in India, in Nazi Germany, and the United States. And I think all cultures probably have some, certainly the native cultures in Australia probably are a victim of some caste system also. But it really was an eye-opener for me. And it was in that book where I learned the term radical empathy. That empathy is not just feeling sorry for somebody. Oh, I wish if I put myself in your shoes, I see that's really hard. No, radical empathy is learning
about what they are actually doing, is actively dissecting so you understand what it means, not just saying it. So
Yes,
I
not
love
just
I love the term
empathizing,
radical
but
empathy.
doing.
So those
Wow,
would be good. If you ask me in an
that's
hour,
awesome.
I'll tell you 2 different ones. So,
well, that's okay. That's all right. No, I'm loving this new question because I'm getting to learn so many more. I don't know how I'm going to read all these books, but I'm getting such a list. But I've spent a year asking people what would their superpower be, and I'm sure my listeners are sick of it now. So I thought, right, it's been a year of doing this podcast. I cannot believe it's been a year. So I thought, right, I'd change the last question up, and I noticed I'd sent you through the last question that was superpowers. What would your superpower be, Bob, if you could have one? Just let's go for 2 last questions.
oh gee, to spread the word of community, forgiveness, and empathy as far and wide as I could.
Wow. Well, I can't complain about any of those. That sounds awesome. They sound awesome. I'm not sure what your Superman name or superperson name would be, because that's a hell of a long Superman name. But yes, no, that sounds great. It sounds really amicable. Look, thank you so much for coming on board. I've cancelled on you, you've cancelled on me, but I'm so glad that we could get together to do this podcast. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today and my listeners. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.